Gettysburg, the pivotal moment of the American Civil War. Documentary. In discussions of historical warfare, it is common to pinpoint specific battles that served as decisive turning points. Notable examples include Stalingrad, Hastings, and Midway, each representing critical junctures that altered the course of their respective wars. This episode will delve into one of the most significant turning points in global history, the Battle of Gettysburg. This intense three-day confrontation took place during the American Civil War, a significant struggle between the northern states, represented by the Union, and the southern states, led by the Confederate Army. From July 1st to July 3rd, 1863, countless soldiers from both factions engaged in a fierce and strategic battle in the town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The brutal conflict marked the end of the Confederacy's aspirations for an independent nation, as the Union forces, commanded by Major General George Meade, triumphed over General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, compelling them to retreat and ultimately surrender. We invite you to explore the events leading up to and during those tumultuous 3 days, which irrevocably transformed the United States and the world at large. Welcome to Wars of the World. To begin, let us examine the state of the war prior to the notable clash in Pennsylvania. Between April 30th and May 6th of that year, General Robert E. Lee achieved significant military successes in Chancellorsville and the Shenandoah Valley before turning his attention to Gettysburg. This marked the general's second effort to penetrate the northern states, following his initial assault at Antietam the previous year. Lee led his army of 72,000 men, eager to capitalize on their recent victories, and to inspire his troops to seek retribution for the loss of Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson. 3 corps were organized under the command of Lieutenant General James Longstreet for the 1st Corps, Lieutenant General Richard S. Ewell for the 2nd Corps, and Lieutenant General A.P. Hill for the 3rd Corps. Following the defeat at Chancellorsville, President Abraham Lincoln relieved Joseph Hooker, the commander of the Army of the Potomac, and appointed Major General George Gordon Meade in his place. Meade promptly directed his forces to confront the advancing Confederate Army, which was already moving into southern Pennsylvania. On June 29th, Robert Lee ordered the gathering of troops near Cashtown, located 13 kilometers west of Gettysburg. The following day, Hill's 3rd Corps, under the leadership of Brigadier General J. Johnston Pettigrew, entered Gettysburg itself. It was at this location that Pettigrew observed Union cavalrymen arriving and establishing positions under Major General John Buford. Pettigrew returned to Cashtown to relay his observations and strategize their next steps. Although his superiors initially underestimated the presence of Union forces, Hill decided to disregard Lee's orders and opted to wait for additional Confederate troops to arrive. He dispatched a reconnaissance unit to monitor the Northern Army. At approximately 5 a.m. on Wednesday, July 1st, 1863, 2 brigades from General Henry Heth's division advanced on Gettysburg. In the interim, Lee instructed Lieutenant General Ewell to launch an assault on Cemetery Hill. However, this directive was declined due to the formidable presence of Union forces, which appeared too robust for a direct attack. The ridge, referred to as Little Round Top, was well fortified under the command of Winfield Scott Hancock. As Heth's division advanced eastward along Chambersburg Pike, they encountered a minor skirmish with Union cavalry at approximately 7:30 a.m. By midday, the Confederate brigade had progressed further east toward McPherson Ridge, where they faced resistance from Major General John F. Reynolds. Despite his efforts to establish a defensive strategy, Reynolds was shot and killed early in the engagement, leading to Major General Abner Doubleday taking command. At this juncture, Brigadier General Pettigrew's brigade aligned itself, flanking the 19th Indiana and forcing the Iron Brigade to retreat, although the 26th North Carolina Regiment incurred significant casualties. The Iron Brigade, commonly known as the Black Hats, was gradually pushed out of the woods and toward Seminary Ridge. With the momentum shifting in favor of the Confederates, Lieutenant General Hill received reinforcements from Major General William Dorsey Pender's division. Together, they further drove back the Union First Corps. The intensity of the fighting was escalating in the western sector as two divisions of Ewell's Second Corps advanced southward along the Carlisle and Harrisburg Road toward Gettysburg. Concurrently, the Union 11th Corps, under the leadership of Major General Oliver O. Howard, was directed northward along the Baltimore Pike and Torneytown Road. By around 2 p.m., the divisions of the 2nd Corps successfully outflanked the positions of the Union 1st and 11th Corps in the northern sections of the town. The brigades led by Colonel Edward A. O'Neill and Brigadier General Alfred Iverson experienced significant casualties. Brigadier General Francis C. Barlow, a Union lawyer and politician, directed his troops from the 11th Corps to advance toward Blotcher's Knoll, aiming to position themselves against Rhodes' division on Oak Hill. Regrettably, this location, now referred to as Barlow's Knoll, was decisively overrun by General Jubal Early, another politician and lawyer, resulting in a defeat for Barlow's forces, with the general himself sustaining injuries during the engagement. As the afternoon wore on, Confederate brigades appeared to be overwhelming Union defenses in both the northern and western sectors of Gettysburg. Major Howard, with reluctance, ordered his men to retreat to Cemetery Hill and higher ground to regroup with Brigadier General Adolph von Steinwehr's forces, following the distressing news of Reynolds's death and the mounting losses. Major General Meade appointed his trusted associate, Major General Winfield S. Hancock, to take command of the battlefield. Hancock is noted for recognizing Gettysburg as a pivotal and strategically advantageous location for the Union Army, stating, "I think this is the strongest position by nature upon which to fight a battle that I ever saw. I select this as the battlefield." Although Hancock had not engaged militarily on the first day of the conflict, his demeanor, resolve, and confidence in his troops inspired the Union soldiers, setting the stage for the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg. The first day had already seen 1/4 of Meade's army, totaling 22,000 men, and 1/3 of Lee's army, amounting to 27,000 men, engaged in combat, suffering casualties, and depleting their resources. As Day 2 approached, Union defensive lines were reorganized into a fishhook formation to counter the advancing Confederate forces. General Lee directed an offensive against the left flank of the defenses at Little Round Top, the Wheatfield, Devil's Den, and the Peach Orchard. Meanwhile, Union forces unexpectedly maintained their positions on the right flank at Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill, managing to secure a minor victory over their Confederate adversaries despite suffering significant casualties. As the intensity of the conflict escalated, Lee promptly instructed Ewell to deploy his Second Corps to initiate a substantial assault on Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill, having learned of the Union's steadfast resistance. This strategic shift left Meade's forces vulnerable on the left and underscored a prevailing atmosphere of confusion and miscommunication within the Confederate ranks, particularly due to the ongoing absence of Chief of Cavalry James Ewell Brown, Jeb Stuart, from the battlefield. Lee would later assert that the turmoil would be resolved and dismissed claims that his strategic choices had endangered Meade's troops, as well as the notion that his capture of supply trains hindered his men from utilizing a pre-planned escape route. Throughout the afternoon, coordinated assaults and realignments of military formations persisted as both sides endeavored to outmaneuver one another and strengthen their positions in Gettysburg and its vicinity. General Longstreet's left division, led by Major General Lafayette McLaws, advanced into the region where they encountered Major General Daniel Sickles' Third Corps. Sickles had previously disregarded a direct order to reposition his forces and opted to move westward, believing that his troops would benefit from a superior vantage point and defensive position at the Peach Orchard, located northeast along the Emmetsburg Road. However, Brigadier General Andrew A. Humphreys and Major General David B. Birney's divisions faced a rapid assault from the Confederates around 3 p.m. Meade was compelled to dispatch 20,000 reinforcements, which included the entirety of the 5th Corps, Brigadier General John C. Cowell's division from the 2nd Corps, a significant portion of the 12th Corps, and segments of the 6th Corps. McLaws' artillery initiated a series of assaults on the 3rd Corps in the Peach Orchard, where Sickles suffered the loss of his leg due to a cannonball strike. With a renewed sense of assurance, they advanced towards Plum Run Valley, infamously referred to as the Valley of Death. However, they were repelled by the Pennsylvania Reserves Division of the 5th Corps, which had stealthily descended from Little Round Top. The ebb and flow of victories persisted as Cowell's 2nd Division faced complete devastation from a Confederate offensive. Nevertheless, they mounted a valiant defense, as General Richard H. Anderson's division, which bolstered McLaws' left flank, could not withstand the determined last stand and bayonet charge executed by the 1st Minnesota Regiment. Recognizing the strategic importance of Little Round Top, Meade's chief engineer, Brigadier General Governor K. Warren, assigned Colonel Strong Vincent of the 5th Corps' 83rd Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiment and the 140th New York to fortify their position in the area. As combat erupted across Gettysburg, including in Wheatfield and Devil's Den, Vincent's brigade successfully repelled the relentless assaults from Confederate divisions. The defense of Little Round Top reached its climax when Colonel Joshua L. Chamberlain and Lieutenant Holman S. Melcher of the 20th Regiment Maine Volunteer Infantry led a daring bayonet charge that secured victory at this critical location. Chamberlain received the Medal of Honor for his role in the defensive engagement, which is regarded as a significant turning point on the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg. This crucial accomplishment by the Union Army provoked considerable anger in Lieutenant General Ewell, who responded by ordering a relentless 2-hour barrage of heavy artillery in an attempt to decimate the enemy forces. Regrettably, this tactic had little effect on the Union's defensive positions, and the combat continued unabated. Concurrently, at Culp's Hill, Confederate Major General Edward Johnson's division crossed Rock Creek with the intention of launching an assault on the Union troops stationed there, which initially comprised the 12th Corps and a small brigade of New Yorkers led by Brigadier General George S. Greene. The 12th Corps was subsequently directed to reinforce the left flank, leaving the lower section of Culp's Hill seemingly exposed to an attack. Fortunately, Greene's forces managed to repel the encroaching Confederates, bolstered by last-minute reinforcements from the 1st and 11th Corps. Similarly, General Jubal Early believed he could outmaneuver and penetrate the Union lines of the 11th Corps positioned at Cemetery Hill. He dispatched orders to the brigades of Harry T. Hayes and Isaac E. Avery to breach the defenses and fortifications held by Colonel Andrew L. Harris's 2nd Brigade of the 1st Division of the 11th Corps. The ensuing assault resulted in significant casualties, with Harris suffering the loss of half his men. The Union divisions remained resolute and continued to retaliate with all available resources, resulting in injuries to Avery and compelling Hayes to withdraw his forces when it became evident that Confederate reinforcements would not arrive in a timely manner. Although it was anticipated that Robert E. Rhodes's division would support Hayes and Avery, miscommunication and inadequate preparation prevented them from reaching Cemetery Hill in time to bolster the offensive. As the second day of combat concluded, the momentum shifted in favor of the Union forces, with Early's troops beginning to fall back. Both armies endured significant losses, with around 9,000 casualties reported on each side. When combined with the earlier days of conflict, the total death toll escalated to 35,000. After 2 days marked by strategic planning, substantial losses, and fluctuating victories for both sides, the third and final day approached, where achieving victory became increasingly critical for securing overall success in the American Civil War. As dawn broke, both factions were still reeling from the 7-hour engagement at Culp's Hill, during which General Lee's Confederate forces were in retreat, allowing Union troops to regroup and solidify their positions. Lee devised a new strategy, deploying 3 distinct divisions against the Union center at Cemetery Hill, led by Major General George Edward Pickett, a former officer in the Korean Army whose name would become emblematic of the battle's third day. Approximately 15,000 troops advanced toward enemy lines, traversing open fields and vulnerable areas in a perilous and desperate assault plan. As the troops advanced across the fields, Lee directed Longstreet to instruct Pickett's Virginia Division, along with his own Y Corps and 6 additional brigades from Hill's Corps, to launch an assault on the Union II Corps' position from the right side of the ridge. At approximately 3 p.m., the operation that would later be termed Pickett's Charge began. This was preceded by an artillery bombardment, during which a Confederate barrage of 150 to 170 cannons targeted the Union Army's position, marking the largest artillery attack of the conflict. In an unexpected turn, Brigadier General Henry Jackson Hunt did not respond immediately. Instead, his forces opted to conserve ammunition and endure the initial onslaught of artillery fire. After approximately 15 minutes, the order was issued to retaliate, resulting in the firing of 80 Union cannons aimed at Pickett's troops, who remained exposed in the open fields. Despite receiving reinforcements from the copse of trees, the Confederate offensive was ultimately repelled. However, the defensive efforts did not entirely neutralize the threat, as Brigadier General Lewis A. Armistead's brigade within Pickett's division succeeded in breaching the Union lines, an event now recognized as the high water mark of the Confederacy. Armistead's forces engaged in fierce hand-to-hand combat with their Union counterparts, employing rifles, bayonets, and even rocks to inflict casualties. Armistead made an attempt to redirect Union cannons against their operators, but was killed in the effort upon discovering that no ammunition was available. Similarly, Pickett's men could not withstand the counterattack from Hunt's forces, resulting in the loss of 2/3 of the general's division during the charge. The location of Pickett's charge has since been designated in military and geographical discussions as the East Cavalry Field. The second engagement resulted in a defeat for the Union cavalry, which subsequently launched an assault on the Confederate infantry. Many observers contend that, despite the Confederate victory, the cavalry tactics and strategies employed were insufficient. This encounter became known as the South Cavalry Field. Although General Pickett's attempt to execute a rapid assault on the Union's position at Cemetery Hill ended in failure, the conflict continued to unfold across various fronts. Simultaneously, Jeb Stuart's cavalry division, comprising 3 brigades and supported by Jenkins's brigade, was dispatched to secure the Confederate left flank. The officers were informed and believed they could exploit the unsuccessful mission by flanking the Union right, thereby gaining an advantage by positioning themselves behind the Union infantry, which was engaged with the Confederate advance. Stuart's forces initiated combat with Union troops approximately 4.8 kilometers northeast of Gettysburg. Stuart's troops encountered Brigadier General David McMurtry Gregg's division along with Custer's brigade from Kilpatrick's divisions. The confrontation concluded in a stalemate, with neither side achieving significant territorial gains. Nevertheless, the Union declared victory, as Gregg and Custer successfully thwarted Stuart's attempt to infiltrate the area near the rear of Cemetery Hill. Upon receiving reports that Union forces had successfully maintained their defensive line, inflicted substantial casualties on Confederate troops, and prevented their advance into the surrounding regions, Brigadier General Judstone Kilpatrick promptly ordered a cavalry charge against the infantry positions of Longstreet's corps, located southwest of Big Round Top. The cavalry unit advanced toward the battlefield, which was characterized by challenging and wooded terrain, posing difficulties for their horses. The situation necessitated the assumption that Longstreet's forces were equipped and prepared for a counterattack. This strategy was likely to lead to significant casualties on both sides, particularly among Union troops. It is recorded that Brigadier General Elon J. Farnsworth expressed his objections to the operation, but was ordered to engage the Confederate stronghold. Farnsworth and a considerable number of his soldiers lost their lives during 5 failed assaults. As the Battle of Gettysburg approached its conclusion, both armies had incurred approximately 50,000 casualties. Reports indicate that the Union suffered 23,055 losses, including 3,155 killed, 14,531 wounded, and 5,369 captured or missing. Conversely, the Confederacy experienced around 23,231 casualties, with 4,708 killed, 12,693 wounded, and 5,830 captured or missing. Numerous historians assert that the Battle of Gettysburg was the most ferocious and deadly engagement of the campaign, noting that during those 3 days, a greater number of generals were either wounded, killed, or reported missing. In addition to the human toll, it is estimated that between 3,000 and 5,000 horses perished in the conflict. Following the battle, on the morning of July 4th, Major General George Meade instructed his cavalry to prepare and maneuver to the rear of Robert E. Lee's forces. During the critical standoff, Confederate troops in Vicksburg surrendered to Major General Ulysses S. Grant. Upon receiving this news, Lee's defensive position at Gettysburg began to withdraw, taking their injured soldiers and horses with them. Lee suggested that an agreement for a prisoner exchange be established, but this proposal was ultimately rejected by Meade. Later that afternoon, Lee's forces retreated to Virginia, facing defeat. In response, Meade dispatched Union cavalry to pursue them and ensure their return, resulting in a brief skirmish in the mountains at Monterey Pass. During this encounter, Hugh Judson Kilpatrick's division succeeded in capturing between 150 and 300 wagons and taking approximately 1,300 to 1,500 soldiers as prisoners. The fighting persisted into July 6th, with cavalry units engaging in close combat near the Potomac River in the Williamsport-Hagerstown region of Maryland. By this time, General Lee's army found itself cornered and unable to cross the Potomac due to adverse weather conditions. Although Meade's infantry demonstrated effectiveness in tracking, trapping, and ambushing Lee's troops, President Lincoln deemed their approach insufficiently aggressive. The campaign continued south of the Potomac River until the next significant confrontation of the American Civil War, the Battle of Manassas Gap, on July 23rd. It was at this location that General Lee managed to evade capture, prompting Meade to halt his pursuit. On November 19, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln delivered his most renowned address during the dedication ceremony at the National Cemetery in Gettysburg. This event was preceded by a lengthy 2-hour speech from Edward Everett, the era's most celebrated orator. Everett's address was meticulously prepared and rich in detail, drawing references from ancient Greece, the English Civil Wars, and the Wars of the Roses, among other historical events. He concluded by asserting that, as we honor the memory of these heroic martyrs, wherever the narratives of this significant conflict are recounted across the civilized world, and extending to the final moments of documented history, there will be no more illustrious page in the glorious chronicles of our shared nation than that which recounts the battles of Gettysburg. Following this, President Lincoln took his place, patiently awaiting his turn to deliver what would become an iconic speech, consisting of only 272 words. Initially, he faced criticism for the brevity of his remarks. However, the address would later be recognized as one of the most poignant and persuasive speeches in history. The Gettysburg Address by Lincoln is as follows. 87 years ago, our forefathers established on this continent a new nation, founded on liberty and committed to the principle that all men are created equal. We are now engaged in a significant civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so founded and dedicated, can endure. We gather on a pivotal battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a section of this field as a final resting place for those who sacrificed their lives so that this nation might survive. It is entirely appropriate and fitting that we do so. However, in a broader sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot sanctify this ground. The courageous individuals, both living and deceased, who fought here, have sanctified it far beyond our limited ability to add or diminish its significance. The world may take little note, nor long remember what we express here, but it will never forget what they accomplished here. It is for us, the living, to be dedicated to the unfinished work that those who fought here have so nobly advanced thus far. It is our solemn duty to remain committed to the significant endeavor that lies ahead of us. From the sacrifices of these esteemed individuals, we draw renewed dedication to the cause for which they offered their ultimate sacrifice. We firmly resolve that their deaths shall not be in vain, that this nation, under divine guidance, shall experience a renewed era of freedom, and that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall endure on this earth. The following day, Everett expressed his admiration for Lincoln's address, stating, "I wish that I could flatter myself that I had come as near to the central idea of the occasion in 2 hours as you did in just 2 minutes." Ultimately, after extensive bloodshed, tactical engagements, and strategic maneuvers from both sides, it was the Union that emerged victorious in the American Civil War. The conflict officially concluded on April 9, 1865, when General Robert E. Lee surrendered his forces to Union General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. The last surrender of Confederate troops in the western region occurred in Galveston, Texas, on June 2nd. Numerous narratives, both fictional and factual, have been recounted about the American Civil War over the years, serving both documentary and entertainment purposes. One undeniable fact is that the Battle of Gettysburg is frequently regarded as the pivotal moment in the war and will be eternally remembered as one of the most significant battles in global history. We currently find ourselves in an era marked by significant conflict, whether it be the war in Ukraine or the ongoing issues in the Middle East. Although humanity may not have fully learned from its past errors, the resolve to fight for one's beliefs was undeniably exemplified during the Battle of Gettysburg. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting histories.